Hello friends and fans, welcome back to John HD Gaming, and today I'm going to showcase my Czech Deck. This is of course the Czech Deck without any specific bonuses, and that's the reason why I get the activation points of 40. Alright, so going straight into it, I've chosen the BVP 1K as my main CV, and the reason of course is that it is an armored CV. Now looking at this variant over here, it is the same price, however, we see that the front armor is 1, whereas the BVP 1K has a front armor of 2. So for the same price, I'll take the higher front armor, and at the same time, the 1K has some 80 gem capabilities, and that's why I think it is a better choice. Now you can see over here, I brought in a couple more of these resupply vehicles, and that's because I will be bringing in a lot more units later, and I'll need a fair bit of resupply, so that's why I'm bringing in a few of these guys. Moving on to the infantry, what I've chosen is pretty standard. I've chosen some faggots. These guys are the 80 GM squads. Motostrokey, these guys are the multi-purpose kind of infantry. Strailers are of course the AA, and the Vidiskari are the special forces. Now what is key is that I've chosen this particular variant as the carrier. This guy over here has some 80 GM capabilities, and I think these carriers will help my infantry survive. What I intend to do is to keep the infantry undercover, such as in the forest or in the cities for example, and place my carriers just outside of those places, and let these carriers take out incoming vehicles such as maybe tanks who would otherwise demolish my infantry. So I think these carriers over here should give my infantry a bit more chance to survive and hold strategic choke points. Now moving on to the support. What I do like about the Czech Deck is that these guys have a lot of AA to choose from, and the Cubs are my favorite actually. These guys have fairly long range against both planes and helicopters, while at the same time being cheap at 45 deployment points apiece. The downside, however, is that these guys are radar based, which means to say that they are very vulnerable to seed aircraft. In addition, they have only 3 radar missiles, which means to say that they will need constant resupply, and that's the reason why I bring in a fair bit of these resupply vehicles, because I'm going to park one just next to my Cub to keep it constantly resupplied. I've also brought in some of these AKMs. These guys have a shorter range as compared to the Cubs, however they have 6 radar missiles, so they can fire a little bit more before they run out of ammunition. At the same time, these guys have a rate of fire of 18 rounds per minute, whereas the Cubs have only 5, so these guys can fire much faster than the Cubs, so that is an advantage. However, most helicopters would outrange the AKM variant over here, because helicopters tend to have a range that is above 1900 meters if let's say they are targeting ground targets, so your AKM will be destroyed if let's say you do not retreat them when helicopters are oncoming. Now I brought in some of these 10Ms. These guys are infrared based, which means that they have the advantage of not being targeted and destroyed by seed aircraft. However, their range against aeroplanes is pretty inferior, in a sense that these guys have under 2000 meter range. So these guys have to be placed together with the AKMs to compensate for each other. The AKMs are good against planes, while the 10Ms are good against helicopters. So keep them together and you should have a pretty decent AA kind of defense. Next, moving on to the tanks, I brought in a fair number of these T-72s. These guys have strong front armor, relatively strong front armor actually. For the price of 40 deployment points or 50 deployment points, I think they are worth the cost. The main punching power would come from this particular T-55 over here, because they have the range of 26-25 meters, and that is fairly long. So what I intend to do is to get my T-72s to draw the fire, let them be the main ones to absorb the fire, while my T-55 stay behind and shoot behind these T-72s against the other incoming tanks. Next, moving on to the recon. I brought in some of the ground-based recon and a bit more of these infantry-based recon. And my reason for it is because I like their carriers. These carriers are the same ones as my infantry carriers, and they have 80 gem capabilities, and that's why I see it as an advantage to help my guys survive a bit longer. Or perhaps I could move these guys to attack, so that could give me some options. Now moving on to the vehicles over here, I brought in these Conquer vehicles and BRDM2s because these guys are pretty good. They have a long range and pretty strong AP power, so these guys should be able to deal the main bulk of the damage against oncoming vehicles. And I'm going to use these guys together with my T-72s, so I'm going to hope that my opponents target my T-72s while allowing my vehicles over here to fire and deal the main bulk of the damage. I also brought in some of the helicopters over here. I chose a cheaper variant because I think helicopters remain very much a situational kind of item. If you can destroy most of the AA in your enemy's territory, then you can use your helicopters to great effect. However, if your opponents have a lot of AA, then your helicopters may not be that effective and they will likely get shot down. Alright, moving on to the planes. The aircraft available to the Czech Republic is pretty nice in my humble opinion. The Albatross, for example, for the price of 45 deployment points, these guys can carry 2 500 kg bombs, so these guys are pretty good. The downside, however, is they have basically no ECM and no stealth, which means to say that they will get shot down fairly easily because they have no countermeasures to protect them. But for the price of 45, these guys are very good to be used as send in and throw away kind of planes. What you might want to do is to bring in more of these Albatross and sacrifice some of your other choices. Having a large number of Albatross flying in will definitely scare your opponents a lot. Alright, I brought in some of these avias and the MiGs as well. The MiGs are the main bulk of my anti-air kind of force. The avias are to support them. These avias have a range against aircraft of 4200 meters, which is pretty decent. These MiGs over here have a range of 7000, and the MiG-23BN is okay at the 2800 meters, so they are pretty okay all around. So I'm going to use these guys together to control the skies while allowing my Albatross to do the main job of bombing the ground units. So that's my strategy. And that's all from me for the Czech Republic deck. These are my choices over here, and I think they make a pretty strong deck. Nothing particularly powerful, but they should be pretty well coordinated and able to support each other. Now do remember that you are weak on the tank on the armored front, so try not to rush in with all your tanks. Try to get your guys, your T-72s, to soak up the damage and get your 80 gem vehicles behind to deal the damage, and all should be very, very good. Your AAs should keep you fairly well protected, and opposing aircraft should be shot down with relative ease as long as you support them with your planes over here. So this is a pretty balanced combination, and I'll definitely recommend it to all players. Seems like a pretty fun nation to try out, so do give it a try. I will be using this deck in my multiplayer game, so do check it out. And that's all from me. Signing off.